Woods, wide open. Woods, he lost it. A cataclysmic turn for Cincinnati. He had 6 in his sights in the ball game. Little double move into the end zone. And intercepted by the Sooners. Number 3, Jonathan Nelson with another big play.
Hey everybody. Yes, it is time for the OU postgame show, coming on a little late. But for Oklahoma, it's a September to remember. 4-0 on the season. And I would rather win a game ugly than lose it gracefully. 31-29, Oklahoma for the second straight week is tested, but they survived the test. This one, a road victory, and they get out of Paul Brown Stadium by a whisker, 31-29 over the Bearcats. Before we break down the game, 2 things. One, give credit to Cincinnati. It's hard to believe this is the same team that entered this game with already 2 losses on their resume. Of course, they lost to Fresno State, and they lost to North Carolina State, although as we're seeing right now, North Carolina State is a better team than what a lot of people gave them credit for. I think they're still undefeated right now, and will have a legitimate shot at challenging for the ACC. But that's beside the point. Bottom line is that Cincinnati, playing in their home city but not in their home stadium, had a pretty good crowd on hand. I think they said that the crowd was close to 60,000 in a 70,000 seat stadium, so Cincinnati was well represented. OU traveled well, but I'm telling you what, Cincinnati looked very pumped to play this game, and it looked like they were ready to play, just like I said they would be on the pregame. Of course, I didn't think this game was going to be a 2-point margin, but Oklahoma does get the win, despite the fact that they were tested in this one. Jonathan Nelson, we showed you those 2 plays at the beginning of the show because those 2 plays were very essential, thus probably leading to Oklahoma's win. And I'll tell you why, because at the time of that first play that we showed you, in which it looks like Cincinnati is going to have 6 points, DJ Woods burns Oklahoma, but it shows you 2 things. It shows you, 1, never quit on a play, because you never know what will happen if you don't quit. And number 2, remember what you were taught, and you could tell that Nelson knew the right way to strip that ball to where it would catch the Cincinnati receiver off guard, thus leading to that touchback that Quentin Carter would become the recipient of. Sometimes coaches teach players to make plays like that. It's either never executed, or if it's attempted to be executed, it never turns out that way. Sometimes players forget to make plays like that in that pivotal moment because things are going 100 miles an hour. So it's great to see that Jonathan Nelson executed that play when it looked like Cincinnati was going to take the lead in that instance. It kept the score at 14-9, and as you saw the other play that I showed you, Nelson, with Cincinnati driving in the red zone, was able to make that terrific interception and keeping the score at 14-9. So Jonathan Nelson making big plays in that first half, and he deserves a big round of applause, because I'm telling you what, that helped save the game for Oklahoma. Of course, for the Sooners, it wasn't all rosy in this game. I thought that the rushing attack, especially in the second half, was bad. And this is a team that I thought entering this season would have a pretty strong running game. It looked good against Florida State. But in this particular game against Cincinnati, they had about 80 yards rushing. Most of that came in the first half. DeMarco Murray did not have too many openings in this game. And again, you got to give credit to Cincinnati. You could tell they were pumped up and ready to play Oklahoma. But having said that, Oklahoma did not execute ground game-wise. Biggest concern I had in this game after watching it was the play of Tom Wart from his middle linebacker spot. I thought, other than one play that he made, which was on Cincinnati's opening possession when they had a 3rd and goal and it looked like they might have a touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, Wart broke that play up, so I will give him credit for that. Other than that, he was getting his tail whipped tonight. He just wasn't a factor. If you're already thinking about backups for Wart, you're going to have to really think deep, because Austin Box, who played a lot last year but has been plagued with injury, he's not going to be ready until maybe the Iowa State game, which is 3 weeks away. So it might be Tom Wart or bust from that middle linebacker spot. That's a big concern for Oklahoma right now, as are the defensive tackles. it was a night that by and large they didn't get a whole lot of penetration on the quarterback. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the ground game of Cincinnati. Who knew that Isaiah Peed was going to have a big game for the Bearcats in the losing cause? He had well over 140 yards rushing, averaged about 7 yards a carry. And Oklahoma, it just wasn't the fact that they couldn't really get to him because of these sweeps and the lanes, but also the fact that they had poor tackling as well. And they've got to get that area sewed up in a hurry, because you're going to see a Texas squad in just a few days that's different than last year as far as their style of offense. It's heavily predicated on the run. So Oklahoma has to do a better job as far as rush defense goes. I will give credit to Oklahoma's defense in at least one regard, and that is, yes, they did give up some touchdowns on Saturday night, but there were moments in particular in the first half where they could have gone to the locker room trailing at halftime, and who knows how this game could have turned out. They could have ended up losing the game. First possession, Cincinnati had first and goal at the 3-yard line. Cincinnati only gets a field goal thanks to that nice play by Ward on 3rd and goal. After that second possession that Cincinnati had, in which they got into the red zone and scored a touchdown, the third possession, an interception by Nelson, and then Cincinnati drove it to the 25-yard line of Oklahoma, but had to settle for a field goal. So you had 4 drives for Cincinnati that went deep into Oklahoma territory that came away with the grand total of 12 points in that situation. So Oklahoma, they had the lead at halftime 17-9, but it could have been a different story. So even though Oklahoma gave up a ton of yards tonight, that's another concern too. Over 450 yards of total offense. That's about 900 yards combined that they've given up in the last 2 games, in this one and then in the Air Force game previous to that. And yes, it is cause for concern. And I know that Texas got beat by UCLA. We'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. But on this night, though, the Cincinnati offense had a lot of success, in particular in the second half. But when Oklahoma needed the big plays, they got them, and they leave Cincinnati with a perfect record. And that's all that matters in the scheme of things. Now let's go ahead and go over the 4 keys to the ball game that we highlighted on the weekly matchup show. Number 1, make it a sack party. I'm going to go thumbs down in this situation for Oklahoma. The reason is because Cincinnati, entering this game, had given up 15 sacks. Most of those sacks they gave up in their 2 losses. 3 sacks, I know that doesn't sound like I should give them a thumbs down, but you have to remember 2 of the touchdowns that Zach Collaros threw, 2 of those touchdowns occurred outside the pocket, including that first touchdown pass in which he rolls to the right. Oklahoma looks like they could get him. Then Collaros is able to roll to the other side, to the left, near the other sideline, before he got the pass away, which turned out to be a touchdown, a situation where if Oklahoma had to do it again, maybe it's a different result, but you only get 1 shot at a play like that, and Oklahoma blew a shot at a sack. And then the other one was that long touchdown pass to Woods, in which Collaros rolled to his left side and got the touchdown pass. So yeah, 3 sacks for Oklahoma, but remember, most of those sacks that Cincinnati gave up were in the losses, so I thought that might have been an opportunity for OU there, and by and large it wasn't, so thumbs down. Key number 2, contain the Cincinnati receivers. I'm going to go thumbs off, or should I say in this case, thumbs split, because on the one hand, Collaros did have 3 touchdown passes, and he did throw for about 300 yards. Remember, though, 80 of those yards occurred on the final Cincinnati drive, in which for some reason the Sooners were only rushing 3 guys. So that's on the OU coaches right there. It was a prevent defense, and prevent defenses, of course, can prevent you from winning. It only took Cincinnati barely over a minute to score to cut the lead to 31-29, thus setting up that onside kick. Thankfully, OU recovered, but it shouldn't have come down to that. Cannot underestimate the value of Jonathan Nelson, which is why I'm not going thumbs down in this situation with those spectacular plays he made in the first half. And a guy that's really coming along for Oklahoma, and really I haven't been giving him enough prop, and that is Tony Jefferson, a new face to Oklahoma. He's making more and more of an impact each and every game, including this one. on Saturday night against Cincinnati. So Tony Jefferson definitely one to watch for in the future. He's getting better for Oklahoma. Number 3, Landry let it fly. I will go thumbs up. He threw for over 370 yards. When I give somebody a thumbs up, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make plays all the time. It doesn't mean that they're not going to make mistakes. Landry Jones, yes, his first few passes were not very good, but second and third drive, including that third drive in which he was absolutely flawless, Oklahoma got touchdowns, and then that opening drive in the third quarter, Oklahoma took it 91 yards. Landry Jones was Mr. Accurate there. He ends up with another good statistical game, and this one occurs away from Norman, so that will increase his confidence. And the great thing about Landry Jones, he can get even better. So I give thumbs up to Landry Jones for having a terrific passing night. At one point, he was 18 of 21 throwing. So good job, Landry. And then number 4, remember, you're in Cincy, not in Dallas. I go thumbs off. Was it Oklahoma's best performance? No. Did they make mistakes? Yes. But do they get the win? Yes. Texas, believe me, a lot of people are going to think that they were looking ahead to Oklahoma, and they probably were, because the Longhorns definitely had a day off, and UCLA played brilliantly, especially running the ball, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. But Oklahoma gets the job done. It was not an A performance for the Sooners, but it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a battle between 3-1 and 3-1, but entering the Red River Shootout, Oklahoma nationally still has quite a bit to play for. So, talking a little bit about UCLA and that stunner in Austin on Saturday. And statistically, I didn't realize that Texas actually outgained UCLA in this game despite losing by 22 points. Biggest reason why was UCLA, their ground attack in the second half, over 260 yards rushing against the number 2 rushing D in the Longhorns. UCLA, simply put, took it to Texas in the second half. The Longhorns did not help themselves with 5 turnovers. By the way, the Texas defense gave up less than 30 yards passing, so the secondary, you can't fault them for this loss, at least when it comes to the passing attack. But Texas's offense contained by UCLA, and as we mentioned, the rush defense got taken to them. So do you think the Lost Doss, the athletic director at Texas, is going to be scheduling UCLA to come to Austin anytime in the near future? I would be shocked if that were the case. Of course, 13 years ago, don't have to remind Longhorn fans of what happened, the Route 66 game in which UCLA scored 66 points in embarrassing Texas that day. On this particular day, it was not as big of a margin of victory, but definitely a game that's going to be just as widely talked about, if not more, because this Texas team, unlike that one 13 years ago, had aspirations of a national championship, and some pretty funky things will have to happen this year. I don't think it's going to happen just because you get too many undefeateds. And for Oklahoma, I don't know if they're going to have a shot at the national championship either. Certainly they got to play better to keep that record unblemished. Believe me, if you think Texas is going to go into the Cotton Bowl on October 2nd and just lay down, and if you think it's going to be the same team you saw against UCLA, you have another thing coming. It is the Red River rivalry. Oklahoma will be favored in this game, but Oklahoma, just like Texas, has issues that need to be resolved, and Oklahoma has to keep focused. Sometimes the worst thing that could happen is to play a team who lost the week before, because they're going to come in pretty motivated and angry. So OU needs to stay focused, and they need to improve the ground game, and they especially need to get better at middle linebacker and defensive tackles. But Oklahoma had enough on this night to defeat the Bearcats and remain undefeated. And yes, we can finally talk about the Sooners and the Longhorns. It'll still be a pretty fun game, and it'll still be a rocking atmosphere. Congratulations to OU. Boomer Sooner.